Welcome to the third episode of Healthcare Matters. Today we are going to discuss the role of pharmaceutical industry in bringing innovation to our patients faster. Also how we can improve care pathways for our patients and support a more resilient and sustainable healthcare system in Bulgaria. We will have a very special guest today, Deyan Denev, the Executive Director of the ARPharM. For those of you who doesn't know, ARPharM is the Association of Research-Based Pharmaceutical Manufacturers in Bulgaria. Welcome, Deyan. Thank you so much for joining us today. And let me start by asking you, how are you today, Deyan?
Great start. Thank you for having me. I rarely get asked this question. I'm good. Thank you. And I'm looking forward for our conversation.
Thank you, Deyan. I believe many people knows you because you are very active in the healthcare ecosystem. You are active as a health advocate in the media. But maybe what would you tell us more about you? What are your passions, your dreams? Who is Deyan?
Well, I'm a husband, a father, hopefully a good one. I'm also a professional. I have my passions outside my profession. For example, history. But not the one we are taught at school, the simple one where we have good and bad guys and we're always the good guys, but the one which you go deep into the details and understand how things work and help improve society.
Great. I believe we can learn a lot from history and maybe also being, a lawyer that maybe helped you how to defend our patients and help them, to have access to innovation and care. Let me start by asking you about ARPharM. What are really the key focus areas for ARPharM in 2023?
Well, our key focus as an industry is always providing the best possible pharmaceutical care for our patients. Of course, that is very challenging in a country, and in particular the political situation we have in Bulgaria now, where we have short-lived governments, short-lived parliaments, and a huge amount of unpredictability. Of course, access is dependent on regulation and on the financial situation in the country. And it's mid-2023, we still don't have a budget, state budget for the year. The National Health Insurance Fund budget is not adopted. And this is related to the way companies work with the National Health Insurance Fund and the way they supply products. So it's impossible to tell yet. I wonder how you guys do it with your bosses, to tell how things will develop in 2023 in Bulgaria regarding the pharmaceutical reimbursement, regarding the payback. So it's a very challenging time, and we as ARPharM, we work with authorities trying to improve predictability for companies and help them ensure sustainable supply.
Very good, very good. And when you speak about supply, I reflect also about patient access to innovation and how important it is to do that timely for our patients. Would you tell us more about the weight indicator and what does that mean for Bulgaria? Any new learning we have got this year?
Right, so the main purpose of the existence of our companies, besides the shareholders, is developing new pharmaceutical treatments which help patients get their diseases treated in a better way, or sometimes provide treatment for a disease for which no treatment was available until now. Looking at what has happened in the last 10 years and what expects us, meaning pharmaceutical innovation, the pipelines of companies, pharmaceutical breakthroughs which could be available for patients in the next 5 years, it is very exciting. Pharmaceutical industry delivers by innovating, by creating new and better treatments. But of course, no pharmaceutical innovation matters if it doesn't reach patients. And whether it's going to reach patients or not depends on the regulation in a certain country, depends on the financial situation, depends on the budgets. What we're seeing in Bulgaria is that Bulgarian patients have access to more or less 30% of the new treatments which are available through authorization by the European Medicines Agency. And there are huge differences in Europe. For example, German patients or Danish patients who have access to 90% of the new treatments which EMA authorizes. the differences between Central and Eastern Europe and Western Europe are significant, and that's not fair. If you live in Europe, you should be available to access the treatment which will provide you the best outcome, and patients are entitled to ask for that and want that. And the weight indicator, which you mentioned, is a study which FPA does with support of the national associations each year, and we collect data. FPA publishes it, and it shows exactly what I told you. 30% of the new treatments are accessible for Bulgarian patients, and this doesn't change from year to year, so we don't see significant improvement. In order to solve that task and decrease inequalities, bring the gaps together, you need the right policy. Pharmaceutical policy, which the state leads. So some of the hurdles currently companies face when trying to launch a new product need to be removed. On the other hand, industry needs to become more flexible, because we understand that Bulgarian health insurance fund does not have the same financial capabilities as the German health insurance funds. So flexibility means providing better prices, better rebates, better discounts in order for patients in Bulgaria to have access to similar treatments as German patients do. And that's a difficult task. It's a challenging task, and requires constant interaction and debate with authorities, requires also trust. And we as an association, we're trying to build that trust with authorities in order for them to see us as an industry, not as a problem, but as a solution.
Very good. And when you mention policy, for example, I would like to build on that, because all of us know about the new EU HTA regulation. So health technology assessment for healthcare innovation in Europe will become different maybe in the coming 18 months. And we know that there is a window of opportunity. So I'm very curious to hear your reflection about the EU HTA regulation, and how can we as Bulgaria increase our readiness in order to really ultimately facilitate timely access to healthcare innovation.
Right. Let us first explain how health technology assessment currently works and why is it needed. So in order for authorities in a certain country to decide whether to reimburse a new treatment or not, and by this I don't mean pharmaceutical treatment only, although that's the focus on the HTA currently, they need to be informed to take a policy decision. This is what HTA does. And it's an expert process in which health technology developers, pharmaceutical companies, submit data based on predefined criteria, and based on that, a national body decides whether to recommend the reimbursement of the product where the patients need it in the country, or not to recommend reimbursement of the product. And currently, there are, in the 27 EU member states, there are 27 national HTA bodies. But companies use the same set of data everywhere, with a few differences when they have to national authorities need to evaluate the clinical effectiveness of a product. So doing this in 27 different countries in 27 different ways is a waste of effort. It's a duplication of effort, and not only that it's expensive and difficult to do, but it also makes patients wait, and they cannot wait. They need their treatment as fast as possible. So the idea of the EU HTA regulation is to do the clinical assessment only once at the EU level, and then all countries to use that joint clinical assessment nationally and complement it with their national economic evaluation, because the prices will be different in different countries, the rebates will be different in different countries, the circumstances will be different. So complementing the joint clinical assessment with the national pharmacoeconomics assessment, if done properly, could significantly increase the speed of the evaluation process, make it much more effective, remove all the duplications, and be good for the patients in the first place, but also for authorities and also for health technology developers. So what needs to be done in order for this to be implemented? First, you need to design how the EU HTA process will work. At first glance, it sounds like a great idea, but it is a complicated exercise where you need to align the requirements of 27 different member states and to create a report, a joint clinical assessment report, which is useful for all of them. And there are differences in the different countries. So you need to create a methodology, you need to create the network of experts who are going to participate in that process, the rules, to set up the time frames, and then based on that to roll out the process. And it starts in the beginning of 2025. As of the beginning of 2025, a small portion of all new products will have to go through joint clinical assessment before they go to national assessment. And then it will be rolled out to all products by 2030. So as of 2030, all new products authorized by EMA, European Medicines Agency, before applying for national reimbursement, will have to go through a joint clinical assessment at the European level. I said this needs to be done in the right way, because if it's done in the wrong way, it will not make the process faster and more efficient, but on the contrary, it will make it more difficult and slower. And in order for this to happen, all countries need to prepare. For example, Bulgaria needs to create a team, and it's done already within the National Pricing and Reimbursement Council, which to participate in that process, it needs to appoint people in the different subgroups of the EU HTA process, need to support them technically in order for them to be effective when they participate. And also, Bulgarian legislation needs to change. And that's a bit challenging in times where the parliament, is in session for 3 months, and then new elections come in. We had 5 elections in the last 2 years. Nevertheless, this needs to be done by the end of 2024. Even earlier, I would say. The process needs to start now. And there are some rules currently in Bulgarian legislation which need to be removed. For example, a new product can be reimbursed in Bulgaria only if it's reimbursed in 5 of 17 EU member states. So if you keep that rule, the process will be delayed and you cannot use the joint clinical assessment. There is another rule which says that if there's no treatment for a certain disease and that treatment appears, you need to wait for the National Health Insurance Fund to include it in the list of diseases they have. And that process, it doesn't have a time frame, it doesn't have a procedure, so it happens, it's an ad hoc process. And you cannot leave it like this, because imagine the joint clinical assessment report for that treatment being ready. In order for it to be used, it needs to be used within the next 6 months all around Europe. You cannot wait for 2 years before it's used. So that new disease and that new treatment has to be able to apply for reimbursement right away without waiting for the National Health Insurance Fund to decide or not to include that disease in the list or not. So there are plenty of things which need to be amended. We as industry, we will consult that process, we'll make proposals, but ultimately the decision lays with Bulgarian authorities.
Very good. So a lot of capacity building is needed. Exactly. Have the right team with the right support system, ensure legal adaptation as the interesting examples you shared, and that then definitely partnership and collaboration where the industry is very much looking forward to collaborate.
Not only industry, academia, patient organizations. In a number of European countries, patient organizations are deeply involved in the HTA process because they provide a very valuable perspective which neither the academia, not the clinicians, not industry can provide in the process. So they have a role. For this, you need also to increase the capacity of the patient society in Bulgaria to be able to participate in that process in an effective way, not to make it more burdensome, more difficult.
Very good point, and definitely patient groups has really a crucial role in such regulation and in the healthcare ecosystem. Maybe that will take me to the next question, which is another interesting dynamic in the European space. We have heard about the recent document, the pharma legislation document on European level, and we know that there is a lot of discussions, there is a lot of point of views. I'm really curious to get your view on this document and also any recommendation for the way forward.
First, we have to say that document is 600 pages long, so it's a huge reform which has been planned, and it's needed because the general pharmaceutical legislation in Europe hasn't changed in the last 20 years, and the world evolves. the political, societal, economic relationships in the European Union also evolve, and a change is needed. And the goal of that legislation, as the Commission suggested, is access, affordability, competitiveness. What does it mean? It needs to improve access of European patients to treatment, pharmaceutical treatment, innovative, but not only. It needs to happen in an affordable way, so the financial systems are not challenged in a way they cannot sustain it. But also, the competitiveness of the European pharmaceutical industry needs to be improved. And all analysis show that Europe is losing the race regarding attracting R&D investment in pharmaceuticals in Europe. We are growing, but the US and China are growing faster. And if we want a strong competitiveness pharmaceutical industry in Europe, we need to create the right ecosystem. So the general objective is clear. How do we achieve it? The devil's in the detail. What the Commission suggests is that the current regulatory data protection, the base regulatory data protection for pharmaceutical companies, is 8 years. So, and this could be increased based on whether the product is for some kind of uncured disease until now, whether it addresses certain unmet medical need, whether it's an orphan drug, a pediatric drug. So the Commission suggests that the base RDP is decreased from 8 years to 6 years. And then if the company launches the product in all 27 EU member states, then it can regain these 2 years. So come back to 8 years. When you analyze that proposal, you come to the conclusions actually it's not going to help. It's going to make it worse for member states, it's going to make it worse for companies. And why is that? Because the weight indicator shows that currently no pharmaceutical treatment, no drug fulfills this requirement. There is no treatment which is launched in all EU member states. Even in Germany, which has the higher access, only 92% of the new drugs are launched, so 8% are not. Meaning that they will not be able to enjoy the 8 years RDP. What does it mean, launch a product? It's not within the control of the company, fully within the control of the company, whether the product will be launched or not. And I gave you an example. In Bulgaria, for example, you might want to launch your product, but the fund has not included the disease for which the product is in the list of diseases. And you wait, you cannot launch it. You might want to launch it, but the HTA process and the pharmacoeconomic evaluation says that it's not cost efficient for Bulgaria, for example. You might want to launch it, but then the National Pricing and Pharmaceutical Council does not approve the price you're suggesting because there is some kind of miscommunication, etc., etc. So to link the regulatory data protection to a process which is not within the control of the innovator is very unpredictable. And also, it means the way it's described in the legislation is that you are within, because it's not defined how the process works, very easily the company could become prey of certain individuals within the administration who, for example, say this company does not want to supply the product in the country when the company wants to supply the product in the country. So we can agree that the European Union, the member states and the pharmaceutical industry and the patients, which are in the center of the system, want better access to innovative pharmaceutical treatment, which helps them live longer and better lives. We all want that. But this needs to be done in collaboration, in a sustainable way, not by saying to companies, if you don't launch everywhere, we'll punish you by cutting down your regulatory data protection with 2 years. This is not the right approach. And the industry in Europe has proposals how this could be done in a sustainable way, including in Bulgaria, and we're working in authorities in that direction in order for this rule in the general pharmaceutical legislation which is proposed to be reconsidered. For example, companies could commit to file, not to launch. in sufficient quantities because it's not within their control. But filing is within their control, and they can commit to file within certain term deadline following the authorization for use by the European Medicines Agency. And then the country can decide, based on the HTA, the joint clinical assessment, whether to reimburse the product or not. So this could be done, but it requires a lot of discussion at the European level. You know, the European legislation process is a lengthy, complicated process which happens at different levels, and it needs to be adapted and consulted at different levels too. And we as industry will participate in that process as active as possible.
Very good, very good. This is very important. And when you speak about, at the end, about the role of the industry, I'm very curious to know more from you about the economic footprint of the industry in Bulgaria. We know that recently you have launched this report to the media and some events about the economic footprint of the pharma industry in Bulgaria and the importance of this sector to the economy of the country. Would you share more with us, and what were some of the key takeaways regarding this report?
That's done for the first time in Bulgaria, and it's an evaluation of the whole pharmaceutical sector. And it's very important because our dialogue with authorities until now has always been focused on one side, on the value of our treatments for patients, which is very, very important. But when the authorities answer back, they always consider only the cost of our treatments for the payer, for the National Health Insurance Fund. It's important also to say that the pharmaceutical industry, pharmaceutical sector, is a contributor to the Bulgarian economy. It brings in 2.2% of the GDP of Bulgaria, which is quite significant. It's one of the relatively big contributors, I would say. That applies for the whole pharmaceutical sector, including innovative manufacturers, generic manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, clinical research organizations, and authorities need to consider not only the cost of our products for the healthcare system, but also the fact that if you help the sector develop, it will help the economy of the Bulgaria grow, improve. And we were able to widen the dialogue we have with authorities. So it's not only talking to healthcare authorities about reimbursement of new products which help patients live longer and better lives, but also talk to authorities on ask them, what can you do to help us develop, invest in Bulgaria more, open more jobs, highly qualified jobs, create research facilities, invest in clinical trials, etc., etc. And it was very well attended launch event in the beginning, and currently we're trying to communicate to the public the outcomes and the conclusions of the report, so it's better understood by the general public also, and by media.
Very good. Thanks so much, Deyan. I believe this is very much aligned even with the World Health Organization direction to consider healthcare as an investment, to talk about healthcare and the well-being economy, because when you invest more in healthcare, as you nicely said, you have a more healthier citizens, you have a better economy, you have a better level of welfare in the society. So I think it's very important really to raise awareness about this point.
Yeah, indeed. The COVID pandemic showed that you cannot have strong economy without strong healthcare. This applies also outside the pandemics. When we talk to within different chambers of commerce we're working with big employers in Bulgaria, they always bring healthcare as a top priority when they decide whether to invest in the country or not. And that is regarding the health of their teams, the people who work for them. And if you have to choose between several countries in the region, the fact that your employees will have better health care in a certain country is a significant factor, whether you decide, this is what they tell us, whether you decide whether to invest in the country or not. So our work as industry also aims in that direction. And if authorities agree that Bulgarian healthcare needs to be invested in order to be improved, then they will also help attract more public, more foreign investment in Bulgaria, more local investment also, and will help the economy overall, because the investment in healthcare not only increases the well-being of each one of us, but also the well-being of the economy in general. So it's very important for authorities to understand that investment in healthcare improves the well-being of each individual, every one of us, but also improves the well-being of Bulgarian economy. So they really need to increase investment in healthcare. Can I now ask you a couple of questions?
Sure, it would be a pleasure.
All right, so your passion for digitalizing healthcare is well known in industry, and not only in the industry, but it faces significant challenges, doesn't it? So can you share your vision on what are the challenges in transforming Bulgarian healthcare from analog to digital, and what's your evaluation on the progress made so far?
Thank you, Deyan, for recognizing my passion for digitalizing our healthcare system. And true that I am one of the believers in the power of health data and how they can improve patient outcomes. Let me start with some of the positive progress that we have seen in the past couple of years. And one example would be the e-prescription. I believe it's one step in the right direction, where it shows also, although we had a certain level of political dynamics in the past period, however, we had some steps in the right direction. Definitely there are some challenges, or number of challenges are facing us, but if I would like to reflect on two key challenges, the first one is related to governance and have really a clear framework and vision for digitalizing our healthcare system. So the key question would be how we can encourage, the accessibility, the interoperability of the health data. At the same time, you maintain security and privacy, because this is key for our patients and key for our society. So this challenge is really being worked on again by having a clear framework, a clear vision of what we would like to do. And definitely we can learn from other European countries. The other side, maybe I would like to reflect more on the digital health literacy. The belief that we need to see in different stakeholders across the healthcare ecosystem in the power of digital healthcare or in the power of health data. One key opportunity for us in Bulgaria could be to build on some of the European bridges and opportunities. So thinking now about European health data space. And for me, it's not just a platform or regulation or direction. It's really more about having more healthier citizens in Europe, having more sustainable healthcare systems, having Europe as a hub for innovation. You mentioned that in our previous discussion and your reflection, but this is really key. So the way we really collect, share, analyze, standardize health data will make a lot of difference for our patients, will improve health outcomes, will lead to more efficient healthcare, and will help us to really sustain the healthcare system in Bulgaria. That's why I see that there is opportunity to build on the partnership and collaboration, and having different partners working for the same purpose or for the same vision to have a more digitalized healthcare system in Bulgaria.
Yeah, just to remind you, before COVID, the e-prescription was a matter of discussion for probably 10 years, but nothing happened. And then you have the pandemics, and maybe not in the best possible way and reason, but it got the digitalization of healthcare moving. And here, even though it's not a central issue for the pharmaceutical industry, we participated in that process, and Roche was one of the companies leading the effort, how to help Bulgarian authorities digitalize Bulgarian healthcare.
Indeed, Dan, indeed, because COVID, as you mentioned, was really like a wake-up call and really invitation to act.
Or a slap.
or let's say a slap in another language. But I believe some of the good things we can do that to take some of those learnings and how to make our healthcare system here in Bulgaria more digitalized, more sustainable. Again, I can see the near future with more decision making based on facts, with more efficient healthcare because it's an investment. I need to be really an efficient investment, better outcomes for our Bulgarian patients. So I believe we have a big potential here, again, to learn from other European countries who started earlier and really to leapfrog in terms of how we can advance our healthcare system.
Yeah, right. I think it's a great vision, and we as industry will play a role in it.
Definitely.
All right, and talking about pharmaceutical innovation, which was a significant part of our discussion so far, Roche is one of the leading companies in the sector when it comes to innovating, bringing new pharmaceutical treatments to patients, but also bringing new medical devices, diagnostics. So how do you see it? What are the challenges you face in Bulgaria? What are the opportunities? And where are you focused as a company?
Innovation in pharmaceuticals and in the healthcare ecosystem is very important. First, for us as an industry, it starts from working on the full value chain, starting from drug discovery, from research and development, manufacturing, providing access to our patients, measuring outcomes. But the very important thing is to keep the focus on the patient journey, how we can really intervene, starting even from prevention, from diagnosis, treatment, outcome tracking. For us in Roche, it starts with the purpose, Deyan. So our purpose is doing now what patients need next. And to make this purpose a reality, we believe that first you need the right resources. For example, last year in 2022, Roche was the #1 investor in research and development in the healthcare sector. And we believe that this brings more innovation to our patients. Some reflections here. The first reflection that you need the right culture, even inside the healthcare organization. And we are very keen to have the right mindset, setting the right culture for our team so they can take, some innovative approaches to improve patient outcomes. Definitely to go broader, you need partnership. Innovation will only matter if it stays in the lab or it stays an idea, high-level idea. So partnership and the collaboration between different members in the healthcare ecosystem is critical. You mentioned patient groups, academia, startups, big corporate, government. Partnership will really make innovation a reality for our patients. Definitely we have challenges here related to the healthcare system, related to the industry. So we are talking about certain level of volatility, but at the same time, I believe we have the right potential to do things right. So the willingness is there, the commitment is there. We have a certain level of resources in terms of infrastructure that can help us. So I believe that the potential and the opportunity is there even to grow further in terms of how we serve our patients in Bulgaria.
Right, and let me finish with this. Is Bulgaria innovation friendly? How do you see it?
That's not an easy question to answer, but I would say that we have a very strong potential for innovation. So we see today a certain level of innovation, which I would rate it high. And this is maybe mainly driven by our challenges. If I give you big challenges, usually you will be more innovative and more creative. But what I would see that we have even the potential in the near future to be more innovative here in Bulgaria and across Eastern Europe, for example. But definitely that will need the clarity on the vision, the framework, what we would really like to achieve for our patients and the healthcare system. There is a certain level of governance and legal adaptation. You mentioned some example with the implementation of EU-HTA, for example, and to continue to invest on the capacity, on the right team, on the right support system for the team, for those key partners working on the healthcare system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deyan. It was really a pleasure having this discussion with you. Please keep on, being an advocate for healthcare, an advocate for innovation. Any final message you would like to share with us?
Well, we live in a complicated world, and it got more complicated in the last several years, which requires for us to adapt and to face the challenges in an even better way. The crisis, as we saw in digitalizing Bulgarian healthcare, is also an opportunity. And that opportunity has to be used. I'm sure, okay, at least I'm hopeful, that Bulgaria is on the right path, politically, economically, and if that right path continues, Bulgaria continues in the right path, this will be positive for healthcare overall. And healthcare, having in mind the demographic characteristics of the Bulgarian population, will be more and more important in the next decades.
Thank you, Deyan.
Thank
So
you.
very dynamic environment. We need to adapt. Challenges can be an opportunity also. Bulgaria is on the right pathway and we can even do better. We have the potential to do better in terms of healthcare. I really enjoyed the discussion today and looking forward to our next episode because healthcare matters.